Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Justine Mercer. I'm UCU President, and I am delighted to welcome you to tonight's UCU Live on the eve of ballots beginning to arrive on your doorsteps in our pay and conditions dispute. It's not too late to invite others to join us. Get in your social media pages and in your WhatsApp groups and get all of your friends and your colleagues watching with us. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. I am joined tonight, as you already saw, by Joe Grady, our General Secretary. Joe, I think everybody knows why we're here. So without further ado, over to you for your opening address, please.
Thank you, Justine. Firstly, before I say anything, I just wanted to let people know that I am on tech duty tonight. Every single one of our teams are working flat out on our FE and HE ballots. So forgive me if there are any mishaps. I don't intend there to be, but bear with us if that does happen. And again, before I get onto anything, you will know if you've been on the union social media pages in the last day or two, myself, Justine, Janet and Maxine, we've all been in Northern Ireland for the past 48 hours, and I want to send solidarity to all of our 6 college branches that are taking all of this week as strike action. Also want to send solidarity to our higher education branches around the UK that are taking strike action this week. And of course, our FE members in England deserve a shout out too, because I know you are, I think 12 days now, 13 days into our ballot. So if you've been posting your ballot or encouraging others to do so, thank you very much. It's good to be back doing one of these lives, speaking directly to members. I have to say, I'm obviously disappointed to be having to do it again. Once again, asking members, asking branch reps, asking our activists to rally and vote yes in a ballot. But we are here because our employers have failed to settle this dispute. Our action has yielded results so far, though. We have turned the tables on USS. Our action did put a pay offer on the table, and it delivered regular negotiations with UCEA on the crucial non-pay elements of the 4 Fights campaign. Over a year ago, UCEA was refusing to even meet us to discuss any of those things. They just sat our disputes right out. So we have moved them. And actually, you have moved them. But it hasn't been far enough at this point. So from tomorrow, you will be receiving a ballot, and that will be a postal ballot for industrial action, and it should be going to your home address. Tonight, we are talking about why every single one of us must vote yes when they receive that ballot. In the second half of tonight's session, we're also going to be talking about not only industrial action, but political campaigning and media coverage, how we build upon all of the work that the union has already been doing, because it is a combination of all those things that will win us this dispute and that will deliver the change that we need to see.
Yes, Joe, we'll be doing everything possible to win this ballot. But to do that, we need everyone on board. We need to pull together. And a key part of that is actually all of us having some honest discussions. And I know from speaking to you earlier that you're keen to tackle some of the challenges and in some cases, criticisms that are coming our way. So let's do that right away. To start with, I can see that there are some members, in the comments, they're talking about the industrial strategy. Some of them are unhappy about the great break in the mandate. Some of them are a bit unhappy about our recent announcement on strike action. So, Joe, what's your response to people sharing those kinds of concerns?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. What I would say, if you're here and you're listening and you're watching, please share the link for this event on your social media page around and about, because we are going to answer these questions and I want everyone to be part of this conversation. So I want to tackle those concerns and questions head on. Disputes do not run in straight lines. We know this in UCU, you know. How many times were we told to give up on our USS pension? Our strike action was meaningless. We know we got that all the time over the last few years. We refused to give up, and we have turned that situation completely around. And that was achieved by a mix of balloting, striking, regrouping, balloting, striking, campaigning, and endless amounts of work by UCU members to campaign and educate each other. And not just in the last 12 months, you know, although we were here last year in a live at a very similar time asking you to vote yes in USS. But we've been doing that for the last several years. On this pay ballot right now, we need to take a look at what we are facing in the UK. We are facing one of the most right-wing governments in history, and they are backing our employers. You know, they are egging them on. We have a set of vice chancellors where the mask is off for the vast majority of them. In vindictive, nasty, they don't want to work with us. They don't seem to value us. And who, you know, have really demonstrated that they would rather crush their staff than negotiate with their union. That is what we are facing right now. Now, no one strategy is going to be a silver bullet for that collection of challenges. We are up against major forces, and it is only through a sustained campaign, an innovative campaign, that we're going to defeat all of them. We know that in the past 12 months, we have delivered as a union, you in your branches, you as activists, you as reps, we have all delivered the biggest ballot results we've ever had, particularly in the post-2016 Trade Union Act world that we live in. We have been delivering bigger picket lines. I think bigger student support actually as well than ever before. We've delivered better media coverage. And I think, you know, generated more pressure. But the truth is, we are going to have to do this all over again. On the break in the mandate, that is regrettable. It's not fatal. We've had several breaks in our mandates before, you know, particularly during our pensions disputes, and look where we are with that now. But what we cannot do here, what we must not do here, is turn in on ourselves. The fault of this situation, that is with our employers. It lays squarely at the feet of an aggressive and an anti-trade union employer. The solution to that is collectivism. The solution for working people is always collectivism. And right now, what that means is a ballot paper. Opening it as soon as you get it, filling it in, and posting it back.
Thanks, Joe. So quickly on to the next issue that we've seen a lot. Some members are saying that we would have already won this dispute if we had called all-out strike action months ago. What would you say to that?
Look, I think I'm on record as saying that at some point in this dispute, you know, we cannot rule out whether or not we would have all-out strike action. But when we press the button on that tactic, every single member in all of our branches at every university has to be ready. And I genuinely do believe if we had called that sort of all-out action months ago, it would have been a gift to our employers. I have constantly talked about building this union, building our membership, increasing our density, keeping every single person together. And I think that call would have split us right down the middle, and it would have been the wrong call. Those of you who are on Twitter will have known we announced in the last few days that Jay McAlevey has agreed to join us in October. That is also our Build the Union month, and she will be holding sessions on building our whole union with us, and building towards mass action. That's firmly on the table now. So again, share that with your colleagues, come along. We really need to make sure that we get everyone who can be in this union.
Yeah, so Jo, now we know how important it is for us to win this ballot and what is on the line if we don't. I think our members want to know, how are we going to pull off this third historic ballot victory?
Simply, we are going to have to do what we have done every ballot, the one that we did this time last year, the one that we did in the spring, when we were tired during those as well. We are going to have to pull ourselves together. In terms of the things that you can expect, phone banking, texting, videos that we'll want you to share, social media posts that we'll need you to share, tuning in when we're on TV and taking part in those debates. There'll be more live events. The live events that we're going to have through this ballot window, we want you as activists to be taking part in them as well. All of the things that you have seen before, plus maybe some more from the Central Union's campaigns team. But the truth is, nothing can deliver a turnout like our members speaking one-to-one. All the things I've just mentioned, they will nudge us up a few percentages in the ballot turnout, but it is you. The conversations that you have in corridors, the chats that you have with people as you meet them, the branch meetings that you have, all of those conversations with colleagues, that is what's going to shift the dial in the ballot. That is what's going to turn this into a third historic ballot that we make over the mandate. And if we do this properly, if we use the next 72 hours to make sure that everyone we know is voting and sending their ballot back, we will stockpile those votes early. And that is how you beat the anti-trade union laws. That's how you beat the Tory thresholds. Get the votes in early and carry on campaigning throughout the rest of the ballot period. We as a union will be pretty much contacting members and campaigning throughout. But you as members, you can really use the next few days and the next week to make sure that everyone you know is reached. Everyone you know has had a conversation about this ballot.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The next 72 hours are absolutely crucial. And the thing that makes the biggest difference are those one-to-one conversations with all of your colleagues and all of your friends at the workplace. That is what cuts through. But it's also important that we recognise the staff at Carlos Street at headquarters and also in the regional offices. So, Jo, what will they be doing to support these efforts?
I mean, the simple answer is everything possible. This ballot, alongside our FE ballot in England, is the number one priority of our campaigning functions right now. You know, we will all be working non-stop to deliver, to support branches. You know, and I think what I would say, if you are in a branch and you feel that you need more support, or if there's something that we, you know, we could do to improve what we're doing in this ballot, just ask, get in touch. But we will be doing everything possible. This ballot is absolutely crucial. And I know that you as reps and members are doing everything that you can. We're doing everything that we can. And I know that our branches really value the work that staff are doing. So thank you again to the staff that are doing everything they can, because it really was the last two times and will remain so this time, a team effort.
Yeah, again, I want to endorse what you've said about the absolute fantastic effort from the staff. Now, before I leave you to the next very exciting section, I want to say that as your president, I will be joining these efforts wholeheartedly. As a member from HE, I know firsthand what years of pay cuts and impossible workloads and casualisation and unacceptable pay equality gaps have done to our sector. This has got to stop. It cannot go on. And I will be with you every step of the way. I want to visit as many branches as possible, and I want to chase down every last vote. And before I go, I know that members really value the solidarity that we get from right across the trade union movement. So I believe we've got a few clips that are basically gonna enthuse us and set us up for the next victory, onwards and upwards.
Thanks, Justine. Before I do bring in the videos, I can see that there's a few comments, and there's two that I really just wanted to address directly. One is that we should be having these discussions privately, and that we shouldn't be having them like this. Look, in general, I think that we do need to strategize, that those conversations are best done, where our employers are not watching over us. But, we also have nothing to hide. And this is a ballot eve campaign, why we need to vote, why we need to actually kind of draw a line under some of this stuff, show our employers that we are united and that we are going to absolutely crush this ballot like we did the first two. I also saw that there's a comment from Phoebe about the financial pressure. I hear you. We do understand that things are difficult. We need to come through this as a union. And I think this is why having a big discussion during this ballot, in branches, but also in other spaces about where we're going and what we do with this mandate is crucial. So keep on making some comments. Let's show some solidarity videos and we'll come back to you in a minute or two.
My name's Paul Novak. I'm the General Secretary of the TUC, and I'd want to just send a quick message of solidarity and support to every UCU member in higher education who's just about to be balloted for the third time by the union on an industrial action ballot around pay and conditions. Ballots are being posted out today. They should be with you over the next couple of days. Please fill in your ballot, vote yes, get that ballot in as early as possible. Now this is the third industrial action ballot, and really you shouldn't have to be here. If your employers had sat down and negotiated seriously with the UCU, you could have found a way forward on a decent agreement on pay and conditions, because this is a sector that can well afford a decent pay rise. UCU members have seen their pay fall 25% in real terms over the last 15 years. That's not fair, it's not sustainable, and it's time to do something about it. So look out for those ballots, fill them in, vote yes, get them back. Support your unions, stand together, stick together, win together. Solidarity, everyone.
And all ballot papers is off for 70,000 UCU members from tomorrow. This is your third ballot. I know some of you would be tired and worn down, but it's more important than ever that you vote in this ballot and vote yes. You've done a fantastic job to win back your pensions and move the employer in several areas. A real victory. You now need one more final push. I'm behind you. We know the value you bring to the communities across the UK and society as a whole. Solidarity with you all. Vote yes.
I think they're two really brilliant videos. We've got the General Secretary of the TUC fully behind us, and also Ian Byrne, who is not just a really good friend of UCU, but actually I think just a standout MP in the UK, campaigning the right to food, knows just what it is like to be in a dispute for the long haul, but also, how much lives can be changed when you actually do break through and get those wins. So thank you for the support. And I want you to know as well, it's just a tiny fraction of the support that our union is getting. There was a group of us that were up at the TUC conference in Liverpool last week. Everybody wanted to come and speak to us. They wanted to tell us about how inspired they are, about the fact that we are fighting and that we don't give up, how inspired they've been by some of our wins, and wanting to know what they can do to help and assist. So thank you, Ian and Paul. And yeah, just a bit of the support that we have been getting. And thank you, Justine. Thank you so much for joining us and for being in Northern Ireland with me. And Justine is going to be hitting the campaign trail with me all around the UK for our HE ballot and also our FE ballot, and back in Northern Ireland if we need to. Now, there is a second part to this broadcast. This doesn't mean that if you still have questions, we don't want to answer them. We can pick them up in the next live, or you can send them in via your branch. But we did want to bring in some people who have other things to say that I think are going to be of interest to us. I've already told you about Jay McAlevey, very exciting. That's coming up in October. But another area that I wanted to cover tonight is media coverage. You probably are aware, but if you aren't, the UK has very, very few industrial correspondents. We used to have a lot several decades ago, but we have very few. We actually have one with us tonight, though. A good friend of UCU, Taj Ali. Taj is a Tribune journalist, though I've also seen him on the BBC News recently. If you don't follow Taj on Twitter, I would highly recommend that you do. He is definitely one of the people that I go to first if there's a strike ballot that I want to get the scoop on, or a workers' issue that I want to understand. So Taj, thank you for joining us. I am very grateful. I know UCU members are very grateful for the coverage that you have helped us with. But let's get straight to it. From your professional perspective, why is media coverage so important for trade unions?
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. I want to send my solidarity to all the university staff in this very long and bitter dispute. In terms of the media, I think particularly now, given the internet age, given how accessible information is, reputational damage is a key leverage tool in moving an employer. And we've seen it used in the past. You know, when I cover the strikes at Amazon, those strikes aren't necessarily going to dent them financially. But when you hear stories of Amazon workers and what they're going through, that really damages the company, and they employ so many people on their PR teams. In terms of the media now, when we look at the industry as a whole, there are very few, as you said, industrial correspondents. We used to have 50 industrial correspondents. Now what you tend to find is people covering disputes might specialize in a particular sector. So for instance, if you're looking at nurses and doctors, you might have a health correspondent. If you're looking at the RMT and the rail strikes, you have a transport correspondent. And the focus is very much on disruption, because that's what brings in the stories. People are more likely to pay attention when their own lives are potentially being disrupted. You can't get a train, you're missing your appointment. And so therefore, I think certain disputes tend to get way more media coverage. Scale's a massive thing. If you've got 500,000 people out on strike, it's a big deal. As I said, before, certain trade unions won't get as much coverage because, they might not have as much an impact on the economy. But also, I think public opinion is a huge thing. If we look at the polling, the harsh reality is university staff do tend to have less public support compared to, for instance, nurses and teachers. And I think often that's because most people don't actually know what we're talking about here. We're not just talking about lecturers. We're talking about a very diverse group of people. We're talking about precarity. We're talking about real terms pay cuts. And the human element story is often missing. And so I think trade unions have a massive role to play in amplifying the voices of their members, telling those human element stories. When you look at the local papers, they are very keen to publish stories. And if trade unions are sending them press releases, if they're providing them with quotes about some of their members, if they're exposing an injustice, I think you are likely to get a bit of a reception. Building relationships with journalists, with editors, I think is very, very important. It's quite a hostile environment in general. You've seen the way certain journalists will grill trade unionists, but you don't see as much of that with the employers. And so I think the other side of this is actually setting the terms of the debate. When I go on the BBC or I go on radio, I'm often asked about disruption. They'll even show like a VT of an individual who's missed the appointment. And I'll come back and say, well, here's what doctors have said to me, having nightmares about the work they're doing, nurses using food banks. I think one of the most effective things I saw recently was the CW had a dispute with BT, and they put a press release out about how BT workers were using food banks. And then they highlighted the role of the CEO, Phil Jansen, who had a 32% pay rise. And they created the phrase food bank Phil, which he absolutely detested. And they plastered that out in the media. I think they did some publicity stunts. It was a very effective campaign. And so, yeah, I think the editor's always going to ask, why is this story important to our readers? Why will our viewers find this interesting? And I think often with such a long dispute, you have to create new angles. You have to explore new ways of presenting your dispute. The RMT, for instance, right now they're doing a big campaign on ticket offices. I think that's actually helped them in terms of public support because it's united so many different sections of society. Often what you find is, for instance, you're looking at the RMT and the divide is railway workers and commuters. With the UCU, it's students versus staff, doctors versus patients. And it's about challenging that framing as well. So I think there's a massive role that trade unions can play in changing that narrative in the media.
I feel like I could have listened to you talk about that all night. I do have a few follow-up questions though for you, because I think I totally agree with you about how you keep a dispute fresh in that sense, in terms of why would journalists remain interested? And from my perspective, and maybe I'm wrong, but, a lot of the mainstream journalists that we end up engaging with, they're interested in universities to the extent that they went to university, that they normally went to a prestigious university. And I think they really, as you say, see the disputes that we have through that lens. Is one of the reasons why the media, barely raises an eyebrow when we go on strike in FE, because, posh people don't send their kids to working class FE colleges. But one of the questions that I had for you was, in the universities dispute, particularly in the pay dispute, when you have, let's say, the Royal Mail or, another employer, there tends to be one CEO, like one boss that you can kind of, as you say, leverage these stories against. We have like over 160 vice chancellors or principals, as they tend to be called up in Scotland. And obviously, as a national union, we have strategies that we deploy. We have stories that we, pursue in the way that you've outlined. I guess my question to you would be, how do you think local branches can gain more coverage? And is there any specific kind of advice or guidance or thoughts that you would give to them? Because a lot of the people that are watching this are going to be our branch activists. And I just think it might be helpful for you to speculate on that.
I think it's about being proactive. So I actually get messages sometimes, I think even from UCU branches, when the marking and assessment boycott was happening, they were telling me about the pay deductions. And so they directly message me on Twitter and say, we think this is worth covering. So understanding, who are your potential allies in the media, who can you get, some coverage from. GMB is quite a regional federated union. So they have the Southern region, the Northwestern Irish region. Some of their regions often send me their stories and they'll follow up. So they'll send an email and then they'll say, did you get my press release? And the other thing that makes things a lot easier for a journalist is being provided with quotes, human element stories. I think it's so much easier for a journalist to cover a story if they know that they're potentially going to be able to speak to a few people. 90% of the people I interview, I use pseudonyms just because they're very, very worried about their identities. And so I think, it works both ways. As much as journalists need to trust the people they're talking to, journalists also have to win their trust and say, look, I'm not here to catch you out. I think, highlighting an injustice, as we said, I think last year we had some data actually that the UCU compiled around how much the vice chancellors were being paid, university investments, and challenging this narrative that there wasn't enough money. And you can apply that locally at your own university. You can look at where the investment is going, open letters, involving students as well, saying that, you're depicting every single student against staff. Is that really the case? Is every single student in that seminar or that lecture really out against their lecturer? Do they not understand why university staff are going on strike? And often it's a lot more nuanced. I'm not saying there's complete support, but you have to, amplify those voices as well, to challenge this idea that this is just one group of workers that just want pay. And the other thing is highlighting how it's not just about pay, how it's about conditions. People are very, very tired. People have, ridiculous working hours. They don't have time to spend with their families. I often find, people who provide personal details, I've got children to look after, This is my housing situation at the moment. It really moves the people that read that piece. And so, yeah, I think personal detail, human element stories are really, really important, because it's not often something you see. You often just see numbers and figures, and you hear like vague talk about negotiation. And so, yeah, I think really just putting a human face to these stories is so important.
That, I think, for anyone in a branch who's just listened to that, super, super helpful strategic direction as to what you could and should do if you want some coverage. Last question. You sort of touched upon it, I think, in the opening comments that you made, but, you know, can media pressure really help win a dispute?
I think that's a complicated one, because, you know, the primary purpose of industrial action isn't to win over the public. And the reality is certain disputes will anger the public. If your bins aren't being collected, you know, public opinion might turn against you. But as long as you win concessions from your employer, you're good. And so I think sometimes we can't fall into this mentality that it's just about public opinion. I think it certainly helps. When you look at the nurses dispute, for instance, they've always had strong public opinion on their side. You know, consistent polling has demonstrated that people have memories of the pandemic. I think what coverage can do is really, really put pressure on the employers, and it's really important that you target it. So, for instance, I was covering this dispute recently in Canterbury, where bin workers were going on strike, and they were saying this is a Labour council that's potentially going to be using agency workers. This is a seat that Labour wants to win at the next general election. Is this the party of workers? That's the press release they were putting out. And when you put that out in the news, that's really damaging, because those councillors are going to have questions to answer with the Labour Party. They're going to have questions from their voters. And so you shift the focus from yourselves onto others. You say, hang on a second, yes, we're on strike, but there are two sides to an industrial dispute. And so shifting the focus is very, very important. Some trade unions often do polling, which basically asks members of the public, do we think that the employer should reopen negotiations? How do you think the employer has handled this dispute? And that when you ask those questions and you conduct that polling, you have data to present. So when you've got a presenter on the television saying you're being stubborn, you're not willing to compromise, you can say, hang on, the public are saying we want the employer to reopen negotiations. And so, yeah, I think it's about shifting the pressure onto the employer. But yeah, again, you know, the reality, as you said, is the media profession is one of the most socially exclusive in Britain, disproportionately privately educated, and we need to change that. And I think social media can play a role in that. I think making sure that journalists get their facts right, challenging journalists. If I'm reporting on a dispute and I've got the figures wrong, and I've not used I've used CPI instead of RPI, I've not pointed out it's a real terms pay cut, I haven't looked at the wider context. I think trade unionists putting pressure on journalists is also a very effective tactic.
Well, you are certainly part of a group of journalists who are challenging that. Long-time admirer of your work. Thank you so much. And I forgot to say, during our last ballot, Taj was actually one of the people who phone banked for us as well. So thank you for all the amazing work you do covering the disputes and beyond. And yeah, see you soon. See you, Taj.
Thank you.
Okay, so UCU members, it is time for us to deliver in this union a rounded strategy for our action. It's something that I have wanted since I was elected. As we've just heard from Taj, we won't win the dispute with just good media coverage, but we won't win a dispute with just strike action either. No one thing can be our only tactic. We have got good media work. Hopefully we'll be able to improve on that even more during this ballot. We know we have to build the union and increase our density. We know that we need to further develop our political strategy, but I don't want this to be a one-way download. I want members to own the direction of this campaign, but also of the strategies that we develop. So in the coming weeks, yes, it will be crucial that we all get the vote out, that we vote in the ballot, that we talk to people about voting in the ballot. But alongside that, we will also be asking you your views on the overall strategy. How do we increase membership? Not just in the union, but in your branch. What do you think are the barriers? They're not going to be the same everywhere. How do we get more political support or different types of political support? How do we win the media war? You know, we have just heard that we're not always the group of workers that people are most sympathetic towards. How do we devise a strategy that brings everyone together, that keeps the union together, and that wins? So, not much longer now, we're on the home straight. There's one last video that I want to share with you. Well done for the team for putting this together. This is our ballot launch video.
It hasn't been an easy year for any of us. While some of our actions have been successful, we haven't made the progress we need to on pay and conditions. We all feel the toll, the action the employers have forced us to take. But that is exactly what they want, to wear us down and to wear us out. We're starting to ask ourselves the question, why are we in higher education? Why do we do a job that chronically undervalues us, that we can't do to the standards we'd like, and that is lowering some of our life expectancies? Why is the value of our work defined by metrics that we don't value? Marketization has taken a hold of our employers and the sector. And it is this mindset that encourages the belief that work time encroaching into leisure time is normal. That 0-hour contracts, the insecurity, burnout workloads, real-term pay cuts are normal. These things are not normal. And the only remedy is through solidarity, not just as a starting point, as a value. The true colours of our employers are now bare for everyone to see. VCs would rather starve their staff back to work, disrupt students' learning, and undermine the integrity of degrees than concede a fraction of their reserves to grant the pay and conditions that you deserve. Our demands are not irrational. They're not unreachable, but a 5% imposed pay offer is unacceptable. Now, I know that this is a third ballot and that you are tired, but our aims are high, and winning big, it takes time. It took the RMT and the CWU 3 ballots to win their disputes. It took us time to get to where we are now with UFS pensions, which is on track to a full restoration. So as soon as you get your ballot, vote yes. Our employers need to understand that this dispute is over when we say it is over. And that will be when there's a negotiated settlement that we vote yes to accept. Not bullying, not threats, not intimidation. UCU and proud.
Always a little cringe having to sit through videos of yourself. But please, you know, do talk to everyone about the ballot. They land tomorrow. And as both Justine and I said this evening, the first 72 hours are so important, not just in returning your own ballot, but in speaking to everyone. So please, tomorrow, take a ballot selfie. This is something we've done before. I'm not saying you have to be joyful about this, but it has to be done. And I want to finish where I started. This isn't easy. This isn't straightforward, but nothing that is worth having really ever is. UCU, our union, has and remains the best vehicle for change that we have in the higher education sector. Not voting in this ballot now means that you are handing over the keys to vice chancellors. Not voting means that you are handing power to politicians that consistently implement policies that damage our sector. Our whole union, and I would actually argue education in general, is in the eye of a storm right now in the UK, but we will come through it. We will come through it in further education, and we will come through it in higher education. More importantly, we will come through it together. Because I don't know about you, but I am absolutely sick of vice chancellors who prioritize buildings and metrics over staff and students. Vice chancellors who never come on the media and defend themselves, actually, And I'm sick of a media who has a bias that holds us to account in ways that they never dream of holding our employers to account. But from tomorrow, we speak. From tomorrow, we start a path towards winning that third ballot, which will be historic. From tomorrow, we are going to choose yet again unity over any division. We're going to choose the union over management. We're going to choose to keep on fighting for each other. For every member, for every branch, and for every university. So sleep well, everybody, because from tomorrow, let's make sure we get every vote back in a post box, and delivered to Civica. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you for all of the comments. UCU and proud.